Sego, Kwe, Bozo, Anin, Tanzi, hello and bonjour. Welcome everyone, and I would like to thank the Gane Genaka for hosting us on their traditional territory this week. I want to acknowledge the knowledge keeper, Shan Kichikake, for his work and for the powerful remarks and the honesty and insight that they've given us. Thank you. I would like to thank National Chief Cindy Woodhouse Nepinak for this invitation and for her hospitality, and I'm also truly grateful to be here with all of you today. Let me acknowledge some of the colleagues that are here joining us. Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister, Terry Duguid, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Crown-Indigenous Relations, Jaime Batiste, Jamie Schmale, Member of Parliament, and my opposition critic for the Conservative Party, as well as Senator Michel Audette, who represents Quebec. Je tiens également à remercier le chef national Woodhouse Nepinak pour son invitation et son hospitalité. Je suis vraiment reconnaissant d'être ici avec vous tous aujourd'hui. With this year's theme of the Assembly, it is clear that we have a valuable opportunity to strengthen our relationship, advance solutions to affirm rights, and improve quality of life for First Nations. Together, we're entering a new era of Indigenous relations, and we're building true nation-to-nation relationships. As many of you know, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples has guided our department's work, especially since the passing of the United Nations Declarations Act. Some of the specific efforts reflected in the action plan include working with First Nations partners on our shared priorities. This includes reforming the specific claims process for addressing past wrongs, redesigning the process for adding lands to reserve, and creating viable alternatives to the Indian Act to advance reconciliation and First Nation self-determination. We've been collaborating with Indigenous partners to put the Declaration into action, to respect and uphold Indigenous rights and advance Indigenous visions of self-determination. Just 2 weeks ago, I was in British Columbia to take important and historic steps to further nation-to-nation relationships. With the Kitsum-Kalem and Kitselas First Nations, along with the federal government and the province of British Columbia, we initialed draft treaties, a large step forward in re-establishing the right to self-determination and self-governance. And we will do this again in 2 weeks with the Comox First Nation. We signed a memorandum of understanding with the Cloquet First Nation to address community priorities, including an unfulfilled 2003 land transfer agreement. This MOU was about working to do the right thing and earning the community's trust. We are committed to doing that. We celebrated the 10th anniversary of the Chakotay Nation's historical decision on title, and we renewed our agreement with $39 million in new funding. We're listening, taking action, and working to address historical wrongs in partnership with your nations. In November 2022, the Assembly of First Nations and the Government of Canada formally launched the co-development process for specific claims reform. This is built on the groundwork laid by the Assembly of First Nations. As part of the reform process, I'm pleased that both the AFN and my department recently posted a discussion paper on a proposed independent center for the resolution of specific claims on their websites for comments and feedback. And I hope many of you provide that valuable feedback. Another example of us working together is a redesign of the addition to reserve policy. We're reviewing your feedback, and we will continue to pursue meaningful engagement that fits your needs and priorities. This includes welcoming the discussions and decisions you make at the AGA in regard to co-developing policy options. Strengthening our relations is a theme that resonates because it speaks to the core of the federal government's work with the Assembly of First Nations. Renforcer nos relations est un thème qui résonne parce qu'elle est cœur de l'action du gouvernement fédéral auprès de l'APN. We've done a lot of work together in the past 9 years, and this includes securing funding to communities to address colonial legacy of residential schools and working towards healing, establishing the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, ensuring that much overdue papal apology, and advancing child and family services and those who should oversee it. We are moving towards real long-term reform based on the notion of self-determination. This means doing the hard work on our end to make sure we are listening, working in true partnership and getting it right, so we can see solidified change in the future that no one government can ever roll back. Reconciliation and our renewed path of working together only moves forward. We cannot go backwards. Over the past 9 years, our government, various ministers and ministries have set joint tables with the AFN and community leadership to work through our shared challenges and priorities. Last month, several federal cabinet ministers and I met with the national chief and regional chiefs to identify and prioritize to improve the quality of life for First Nations and to close long-standing socioeconomic gaps through the permanent bilateral mechanism. This meeting provided a chance to discuss critical issues that will guide our relationship, including First Nations policing, closing the housing and infrastructure gap, child welfare, education, climate leadership, and economic reconciliation, among other things. I look forward to continuing this work at the next leaders' meeting in the fall of 2024. Last year's announcement of Canada's collaborative modern treaty implementation policy marked a major milestone and a new phase in our relationship as well. It set the direction for making progress on shared priorities, including establishing the Intergovernmental Leaders Forum and co-developing the independent oversight mechanism, the Commissioner of Modern Treaty Implementation. Consultations with modern treaty partners on the draft legislative proposal to establish the Commissioner is well underway. These efforts will go a long way in ensuring that we live up to our commitments and responsibilities made under the modern treaties. Moving to another critical milestone reached, this year marks 5 years since the release of the final report of the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. We all agree that this is a national crisis. Every Indigenous woman, girl, Two-Spirit and gender-diverse person in Canada deserves to be safe, honoured, and live free from violence. Since the launch of the inquiry, we have made efforts to advance the federal work outlined in the Calls to Justice. On June 3, 2024, the latest Federal Pathway Annual Progress Report was released and highlighted progress over the past year, including 47 emergency shelters, 52 community safety projects, reliable internet for over 3,000 Indigenous households, and improving midwifery services and infrastructure in close to 100 Indigenous communities and organizations. While we continue to review progress with partners, the majority of calls to justice in which the federal government is involved have been actioned. An example of this is a mobile birth center program in 6 nations of the Grand River. We will continue to be relentless in our push to see these calls to completion. Budget 2024 is building on this tangible progress through additional proposed investments to address the calls to justice in areas such as housing, health, addressing anti-Indigenous racism in healthcare, culture, and First Nations and Inuit policing. The Government of Canada and Manitoba recently announced a partnership to co-develop a pilot red dress alert system with Indigenous partners. This initiative is supported and identified in Budget 2024. And we're providing funds towards the Government of Manitoba to support its search of the Prairie Green landfill for 2 murdered First Nation women. This too was long overdue, but we are so pleased to now have a willing partner in the new Manitoba government who are committed to doing the right thing. We acknowledge the grief and pain of families who have been missing or their lost ones. Personally, since becoming minister, meeting with frontline workers, local support organizations, and families and survivors and advocates, I'm motivated by their strength and resilience. Our priority, as outlined in the federal pathway, is to provide assistance in services for the healing journeys of individual Indigenous family members and survivors in whatever form that is meaningful and helpful to them. While federal investments are important, honoring our legal obligations to First Nations and working together to renew relationships are key to addressing historical wrongs with Indigenous peoples in Canada. In June, the Federal Court of Canada approved the distribution protocol for the first claims process for the First Nations Child and Family Services, Jordan's Principle, and Trout Class Settlement Agreement, marking an important milestone towards compensating children and families who are harmed by the discriminatory undertaking of the First Nations Child and Family Services Program and those impacted by the federal government's narrow definition of Jordan's Principle. My colleague, Minister Haidu, continues to lead the critical work of child welfare reform and will continue to work together with First Nations leadership to ensure the rights of their children and communities are respected and upheld. As we continue to address the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action, we are guided by the strength of survivors and their families, including those who continue to live with the painful legacy of residential schools. I note just this week, Cross Lake becomes the latest community in which the search for their loved ones have materialized. The shared journey of reconciliation continues to evolve, but one aspect will never change. We must ensure that this significant part of our history is never forgotten. Ce parcours commun de réconciliation continué d'évoluer, mais un aspect ne changera jamais. Nous devons veiller à ce que partie importante de notre histoire ne soit jamais oubliée. We will implement the calls to action and the principles set down by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission through political will, joint leadership, collaboration, building trust, accountability, and transparency. I want to emphasize here in front of all of you that I, alongside our Deputy Minister, Valerie Gideon, who is here in the room today, are committed to doing the work needed to see our relationship grow stronger and create outcomes for First Nations. In a time where the system still isn't working quite right, racism being live and well, and appalling claims of denialism have broken into the mainstream. It is in this moment where we must reaffirm our commitment and continue to strengthen our relationship. It wasn't that long ago when First Nations did not have a willing and honest partner in the federal government. That will never again be the case in our relationship, and I promise you that. It may not always be easy, and it certainly hasn't been perfect, but we will be here to work in true partnership in order to make real progress and advance reconciliation. And we cannot let anyone take us backwards. Thank you once again for welcoming me to your annual General Assembly, and I look forward to strengthening our relationship. Welali o ni wa miigwech. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. Okay, so for the remainder of this session, so for the next 14 minutes, we have time to take questions. What we propose is to go and to take three at a time, so three at a time, and then we'll have a response from the minister. We'll go to microphone 1, 2, and come back to 1. So over to microphone 1, please.
Good morning. Vera Mitchell, Chief Poplar River First Nation. Thank you, Honourable Minister, for coming to see us today. But I want to express my disappointment in your statement of reforming child and family services. Because I don't know if you're aware, but in Manitoba, Child and Family Services, all the agencies are mandated by the province. They are not accountable to our First Nation communities or people. They own the agencies, and they're directed. We don't have a mandate in Child and Family Services. So why do we want to assist the province in reforming a child welfare system that is broken? We have been talking about this for the last 20 years. We're never going to be able to reform child welfare unless the jurisdiction is given to our people. I want you, if you may, go and read the Indian Act. You have the capability as the Indian agent to give us jurisdiction of child welfare. And while you're at it, give us gaming too. Thank you.
Miigwech for that. Microphone number 2, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Cheryl Casmer, proxy for Nasukan Joe Pierre of in British Columbia. Minister Anandasangaree, it's good to see you again, and thank you for providing us with the update. However, I have to disagree with you on a certain matter, and that's in relation to progress that you've stated has been made on the calls to justice. There are 231 calls to justice, and from what we understand and what we've been updated on is that only 2 of those calls to justice have been completed. And to me, that is a shame. That is shameful. Indigenous women and girls continue to go missing, continue to be subjected to discrimination, and continue to be subjected to violence. And when we have only 2 calls to justice that have been achieved of the 231, that just sends a message to the rest of Canadians that Indigenous women and girls continue to be seen as disposable. And that is totally unacceptable. And I know that you can't do this alone, so I'm calling on you to call on your other partners, the other ministries, to ensure that there is a whole-of-government approach to implementing these calls to justice. Because when it comes time to next year, when we have the next annual report, I certainly hope that there is going to be a heck of a lot more progress and a heck of a lot more to report on so that we can see what's happening to realize those changes on the ground in our communities. There's too many reports of murdered and missing Indigenous women in this country, and it's shameful. I can't think of another word to say other than it's shameful, and we need to stop that. And you need to work with us closely in making sure that we can work towards the implementation of those recommendations and to make sure that we are actually making a change in this country. Because without that, this is going to continue to happen. Thank you.
Miigwech, Chief. So if a technician, if you can please put 4 minutes for each chief, and thank you for not using all your minutes, but I'll manage the period of time, the remainder of period. So microphone number 1, please.
Wajik, so we are starting with Taiwan in Snahasana, Dobbs, First Nation, Dostin. And then ask one of us when I go to Vigidian, Nestabishis, Tamahayano, Gagi, Bagatinaco, Demon, Dandy, Winston Shalbert. I am honored to be here today, Wajik Minister. You know, the report you just did, it sounds too good, because it doesn't reflect what you say about my community. You know, I'm situated in the remote north. We live in a half square mile of land, and we're packed like sardines. And we've been at this ATR process far too long, and it's been too long. And now we got to the point where I get really frustrated, and I told government in Ontario, do what you need to do to release some land so we can develop. We need land, we need infrastructure, we need housing. You know, the state of my community shouldn't be living in this condition. And I urge you, you have to do better You have to do better with our relationship, the relationship we're supposed to have as nation to nation, and it's just not happening fast enough. You know, we need to build, we need land, and it's really disrespectful and shameful that I have to go through this process just to acquire more land when it's our land to begin with. You know, it's shameful. And we need to do better. I don't understand why you form two departments of serving Indigenous people. One is the program and one is relations. And I get frustrated when I try to make a call to you directly. You're no special to me than I am, you know? We're supposed to be equal. You guys say you work for us. We need to be answered. And I came here I came to the assembly just to have our voices heard. The one in the remote north, the one that are trying to get out of poverty and meet the basic needs for their people. There's a lot of us communities out there, and we have to do better. We have to do better, people. All the chiefs. Mingesh, thank you.
Miigwech Chief, we'll go back to Minister. Over to you. If you want to take the microphone over there, it's up to you, or you can come here as you wish. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and let me just try to answer some of these questions. I think with respect to Chief Mitchell about child and family services, it's an area that we have worked a great deal on together with the Assembly of First Nations as well as many other partners, and fully recognize that there's work to do. And as we finalize agreements and finalize discussions, I think it's important to keep in mind what this is all about. This is about ensuring children are left in their communities and stay in their communities. At the same time, the communities themselves have self-determination over this issue, and I think since the decision of our government to bring in, or the Supreme Court rather, to reiterate our ability to enter into C-92 discussions and ensure that there is self-determination, I think the pace at which we're moving towards agreements has really speeded up. But we know that there's still a lot more work to do, and we will continue to work. Chief Casimir, I know the issue around missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, I think, is something that, that really it's been a very difficult conversation. It's been a difficult journey for many in this room, many who have been fighting for decades for governments to act. And while I fully recognize the frustration you have, and I too share that frustration, I just want to assure you that we are in the right track. We are working together. This February, we had the second Indigenous provincial, territorial, federal meeting on missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit individuals. This is the second of its kind, and we bring everyone together who are impacted and who are working in the front lines to sit down with governments and to come up with solutions. And I think as we're progressing, and while the pace of progress may be frustrating, make no mistake that we are going in the right direction. And one of my commitments is to make sure that we put an end to this tragedy. This is not something in 2024 is acceptable to have Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirit individuals feel unsafe. This is a priority for us. We need to work together. We need to continuously engage each other and to understand each other. And one of the things that I realize is that what happens in northern British Columbia is very different than what happens in downtown Winnipeg, or what happens in Ottawa or other major cities. We don't have one crisis. We have multiple crises in different areas. But the underlying reality is that it's rooted in racism and systemic racism, whether it's be the police, the justice system, or the lack of basic services, and also the gap that exists between First Nations and non-First Nation people. But I look forward to working together with you, Chief, and to all of you here. This is something we will get to the bottom of, and it will require sustained efforts. To Chief Sylvie, I think on the ATR, there will be a lot of discussion has taken place, and I know we've done a lot of work. And I think we're close to the end on this, and we're close to having a process that is a lot more accessible, and with some policy changes coming down the line. The work that's been done by the Chiefs of Ontario as well as AFN, I think, has been very, very important. And the next step is for us to develop and get that policy through Cabinet, and it's something that we will work towards. I also recognize that in remote communities particularly, it is much harder to access resources, much harder to access supports, especially on issues like healthcare, and the gaps are actually much larger. So we do need to continue to sustain those efforts to close those gaps. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Minister, thank you very much, Chiefs. And Minister has agreed to, because it's already 11, so the period of time would be ended at this time, but he agreed to take three more interventions, so three more chiefs. So the quickest way, as I mentioned, would be to hear the three of you and then go back to Minister, and then this will end the session. So, because our other guest is already arrived. So we'll go to microphone number 2, then microphone number 1, and we'll go back to microphone number 2 for the three last speakers. Microphone number 2, please. Over to you.
Right. Election 1 in Jawa and Squash Lease Behan Cook Bevan Selectco in the Cup Nation, British Columbia, Canada. Good morning, Lease Behan Chief Co-Water Band. This morning I have a contingency beside me to support me, Chief Dan Manuel Upper Nicola Band, Chief Jordan Spinks, and Chief Pamela Robertson, as well as members of Council of Co-Water Indian Band. I thank you for your report, Minister, and you know, one of the things that you talked about was the historical wrongs that Canada has done. And I want to talk to you about the Trans Mountain pipeline, the existing one, the one that was put in 1950. And what Coldwater has a problem with, and you know, we met with your predecessor, Minister Mark Miller, in January. And Minister Haydu committed to obtaining Coldwater's consent moving forward. And for the time dealing with the trespass in terms of Coldwater, and the consent is now. Failure to do so creates financial and reputational risks for Canada and any potential pipeline purchaser regarding the Trans Mountain Expansion Pipeline. And I tell you this because, you know, Canada has not committed to Coldwater. And we hope, with you being here today and listening to the commitments that you're putting forward, that you go back and you talk to Minister Haydu and Minister Freeland and tell them to come and meet with Coldwater Indian Band. And we hope that, you know, you look at all the chiefs here. In the past, we've had more than 5 questions. We're down to about 2. So I hope, as a federal minister, you know, you take the time to listen to all the chiefs, because we've traveled a long ways to come here and listen to your report, and then hopefully we don't get pushed away and not get our questions answered. Guksham, thank you.
Miigwech, Chief. So we'll go to microphone number 1, please.
I just want to take the time to thank the elder for the prayer, and I thank the Creator for another day. But I have troubles when you talk about modern treaty and you include Métis with the modern treaty, but you're disrespecting the historic treaties. There wouldn't be a Canada if it wasn't for our treaties. You know, you talk about nation to nation, There's a troublesome resolution. I don't even know if you look at all the resolutions. Resolution 35 dealing with treaty. We want to talk about nation to nation, you come talk to me. You don't come talk to this AFN table or whatnot. You want respect, you got to treat us the same. At least say hi on the street when I pass you. You know, and the Natural Resource Transfer Act. No, we shouldn't be struggling in our own lands. We should be the Saudis of Canada. Why are our people sleeping on the streets? If that's not right. Our people are suffering with addictions and everything. My community's being overlooked. No, even the structure of AFN, how it's set up. You know what? It's troublesome when the big bands have the same vote as littler bands. Even the formulas with the monies handed out, it's very troublesome. And we got limited time here to talk, you know, so I'm going to give my time, the rest of my minutes to my brother here from Beaver Lake. You know, we're holding a treaty meeting, 1 to 11 in Cold Lake, August 26th to 30th. You're invited to come. The Governor General will come. And if the King, if you're listening, come. And if Trudeau, if you have balls enough, come to my territory. But I'm going to pass it to
Chief Gary Lehman, Beaver Lake Cree Nation, Treaty 6 territory. Once again, we are co-hosting this Treaty 1 to 11 gathering on the shores of Cold Lake, beautiful Cold Lake. And again, an open invitation to all to talk about everything treaty and our sacred treaties. What I wanted to mention was the opioid pandemic. I think there needs to be more energy put towards our opioid pandemic that's going on here and destroying our people at an alarming rate. Minister, you know this, and we've talked about this before. I just want to talk to you about putting more energy, resources, funds towards our this opioid pandemic. The evolution of addiction is it's alarming, and we need to keep up with this. So our First Nations, we need to have the resources to fight the way this addiction problem is going. So I ask you to start talking to the other ministers, talk to the Prime Minister and tell him, okay, let's start putting some muscle towards this, some financial muscle and resources. Thank you.
Miigwech, Chief. So just Chiefs and Proxies, just want to remind you all that maybe to make sure that language is appropriate, respectful at the microphone. But on that, we'll go to our last speaker, microphone number 2, please.
Good morning. My name is Regina Crowchild. I'm proxy for Chief Roy Whitney at Tsuut'ina Nation. To back up what Chief Jacko just said and Chief Lehman, I want to notify you, Mr. Minister, if you listen, quit being on your phone or talking and listen to us. That's what you're here for. That to inform you that we have international treaties with the Imperial Crown, not with the state of Canada. The state of Canada is only in our territory because of our treaties. You have a responsibility as given to you by the Crown that you implement the promises of treaty, not make us subordinate to you. We are sovereign nations like Great Britain. The state of Canada gets their authority from Great Britain to legislate. We have our authority from our Creator, same level as the Crown. So why are you trying to do away with our treaties where you have no business trying to terminate our treaties with the Imperial Crown? It's time, and it's time, you know, that you come and talk to the rights holders. In early March of 2016, your Prime Minister came to our nation. At that time, we invited him to come and meet with Treaties 1 to 11 rights holders. He has yet to come. Your ministers come for 2 hours and then they take off. And the same thing looking on their phones while we're trying to address our issues with them. There's got to be respect. And the reason why our peoples are living in poverty, they're on the streets, they have addictions, they have all those mental health issues, is because what Canada has done to our peoples. You want to correct it? You need to talk to us. You need to provide us with the resources so we can correct the wrongs that you did to our peoples. We are tired of you coming to this assembly where our consent is manipulated. So if you want true reconciliation, you want to have a better government-to-government relationship with us, come to Cold Lake and meet with our chiefs, who are the rights holders, not AFN. Thank you.
Miigwech Chief. So once again, a reminder to you all chiefs and proxies, kind reminder to please be mindful of your language when we are at the microphone. But on that, it's my first. Thank you for this. First boo. Okay, so on that, I want to go back to the minister to give him a chance to answer to you, chiefs and proxies. And I'm turning the floor over to you. Okay, perfect. So, Minister has agreed to go for 2 more. So, as you know, we'll go for the next, and the next speaker will be 1, and then we'll go to the last. This one, it's for real. Last speaker at microphone number 2. You can share your time if you want. You have 4 minutes, and if you can be the more precise and concise, brief as possible, would be appreciated for the rest of you. So over to microphone number 1, please.
My name is Anabedi Yachnibaneshkam. I serve as a Deputy Grand Chief for Anishinaabe Nation. I'm proxy for Ganoguming. I'm going to keep my comments very short because I respect that I have other leaders here behind me to speak. Minister, you know, you used the words such as self-determination and treaty, and you know, you need to ensure that when you're using those terms that you're respecting what they mean and what our definition is. You also mentioned that your government has been part of implementation of the calls for justice, but unless you come to Attawapskat, unless you come to Sandy Lake or any of our remote communities, you will see that the report that you have is not true, that we are still deprived of you know, adequate policing services, safe places, and also to the resources and services for us to help our families. 20 minutes ago, I was on the phone trying to acquire secure funding for a family who are searching for their daughter or sister who has been missing for 13 months. And I have nothing. But yet you pride yourself on saying that you are implementing the calls for justice. I urge you to review that again, and unless you come to Attawapskat, Sandy Lake, or Fort Severn and other communities, and then you assess again. Miigwech.
Miigwech Chief. The reminder for you, Chief.
Shorting, Little Saskatchewan First Nation, Councillor Hedman for my First Nation in the North Interlake of Manitoba. I'm here to talk to the Indigenous Services Canada here. Meaningful consultations. I don't want to repeat what the other leaders have already spoke about, nation to nation, ATR. My question to Canada would be meaningful consultations need to take place in the area of ATR. We're giving away our lands at an alarming rate to foreigners, and that includes our crown lands of this country called Canada. We're losing Iskunigan in my First Nation is called leftover land. We need to add more lands to our lands that we have so we can share and live off the resources that Canada is enjoying. They're enjoying these resources to their benefit. How many homes they're creating for the foreigners that they're bringing in, and without proper registration, without proper identification with these foreigners that are coming into our country. Why is that? We are all surveyed out, Minister. All of our country here in Canada, our First Nations are surveyed out, and we also say every child matters. Why are we excluding the children that were brought up in the provincial CFS system? Why are we continuing to avoid them from receiving any benefits from that $40 billion that's coming? It wasn't my children's fault when they were removed in 2011 due to the man-made flood in the North Interlake. A man-made flood that was not our fault. Our children were placed in the provincial welfare system. Now, because that happened, now my children from my community that were purposely removed are not entitled to that $40 billion that's coming. So, Minister, correct the wrongs. Correct our youth. We say every child matters. Let's make every child matter. Count them in. Thank you.
Miigwech Chief, so the last 4 minutes. Microphone number 2, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chief Marcel Head from Shoal Cree Nation. Not too long ago, we entered into a self-government, self-determination with your lead negotiator. But there's, you speak of words like, working together, collaborating together, strengthening the relationship. That relationship is weak in terms of the negotiator. There's an unwillingness to, charter into a process that we call that's unchartered and unique. And that is going back to the original spirit and intent of treaty, to right the wrongs. Not the government to right the wrongs, but will teach you how to right the wrongs. There's so many injustices that have happened throughout the years since the day after treaty. And today we have a process that we tell the government of Canada that this land called Canada is still our land. It was never given up when we signed treaty. It was never given up, nor the resources that are within the traditional territories. I stood before 3 prime ministers, Mr. Minister, and I've told them exactly the same thing. It's time that First Nations in Canada take their rightful place in Canada to take back what was taken and stolen from us, the lands and the resources that still belong to us. Now, this process in regards to self-determination, you've got to straighten out your lead negotiators. There is an unwillingness there to negotiate self-government, self-determination processes. We're telling Canada to push aside all your policies, your legislations, and listen to a process that dates back what should have happened the day after treaty. And you've heard chiefs here today, speaking of treaty. There is a relationship that was broken right after the day of treaty. And we have to, reconcile that process. And I'm talking about, going back to the spirit and intent of treaty. So I want you, Mr. Minister, to talk to your lead negotiators, specifically with Chris Durand, who's unwilling or unprepared to listen to what the process means to us. And that is going back, like I said, going back to the original and spirit intent of treaty. That's all we asked for. And I understand, there's a councillor from James Smith that wants to address the minister in the last few minutes. Thank you.
Miigwech Chief, so the last, the remainder of the time, you share it between yourself. Over to microphone number 2, Chief.
Good morning. My name is Alvin Mustus. I'm from James Smith Cree Nation. I'm here on behalf of Chief Kirby Constant, new elected Chief of James Smith. I'm a proxy for Chief Constant. The thing was very important to us is that I want to ask the Minister to rescind the NRTA transfer agreement. It's destroying it's keeping us poor as people. I don't know why the provinces don't want to share with the First Nations. Yet back in Saskatchewan, we have lots of reserves back home, and nobody wants to share. But the federal government, the provinces don't want to work together. How are we supposed to move ahead if the provinces and the federal government don't work together? That's setting everything back. So we have to see, the federal government has to try working with the provinces, and the provinces working with the federal government and the First Nations to bring all our people to the table. Right now, we can't even get the province to the table. We always have to come to Ottawa for talk to ministers, and I don't know what's going on there, so something's going to happen. So I like to see the provinces, federal and the First Nations people working together to move this country forward. So with that, thank you very much.
Chief, can we have 30 seconds? 30 seconds.
Yeah, no, thank you, Minister. We're asking a simple question. We're also asking the AFN to support the treaty, the three Western nations there, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta. We continue to work on this Natural Resource Transfer Act. We want that support. But, Minister, what we said last spring with the Assembly here, we ask you to work with your Minister, your Attorney General. We ask that question again, to repeal and rescind the Natural Resource Transfer Agreement Act. We ask that, Minister. We will continue saying that, and say that also to the Prime Minister. We want revenues. We want our land back. We want part of our resources. We agreed with the treaties to share the land and share the resources. We never ceded anything. We never gave anything up, Minister. Very simple question, okay? Thank you very much.
Miigwech, Chief. So I just, okay, because of the boo a bit earlier, I got a deal, and we will have time to the last 4 minutes. So please share it between yourself. I trust you. So microphone number 2, please.
All right, I appreciate it as the host nation, or Kanien'kehá:ka, so I'm going to share it with my colleague from Anandasangaree. So, Minister, I mean, we had a conversation not too long ago, and you had mentioned about looking at pathways to correct injustices, and the topic was about membership. And my pathway that I thought about, but we had to get cut off in the caucus room, is simply enough that turn membership over to the communities and we will determine who our people are, and not for the federal government at all. The federal government needs to be out of membership altogether, and we will determine our people and who they are.
Thank you, Chief.
I am the Grand Chief of Anandasangaree and Mohawk Territory. My question is to the Minister and Minister Haju concerning the illegal dumping in my community of Anandasangaree and the characterization and the dictatorship choice that your office has made to my community rather than letting my community decide who's going to do the characterization of that. And that bill is upwards of over $100 million. Yet you refuse to listen to my community and my office, my elected office, but you're listening to 5 ousted individuals who were ousted in non-confidence vote from my community twice in October and November of 2023. But you're ignoring my emails and my letters and my text messages to your own cell phone number. So I want to know why you're not listening to my voice and my community's voice, which I carry. And when are you going to meet with my community to discuss this issue of illegal dumping and toxicity in my community of the illegal dumping and the wastewater and the characterization of a large site and other dump sites in my community? I'm tired of being ignored. My community is tired of being ignored. When are you going to start listening to my community? You say you're here to listen to communities, but you're not. You're listening to 5 ousted individuals who are running on the Indian Act when my community is a custom band. You're not listening to us. You're not listening to community. You're not listening to people. Start listening to their voice. We know what we want. We know how to fix it. We've made you guys survive here for hundreds of years. We know how to fix our problem. Listen to us. Give us that chance. Give us the opportunity. Come to my office and talk to me and my community. Yango.
Chief. The reminder of the time, microphone number 2, please.
It's probably very apropos that I say these words today on Haudenosaunee traditional territory. I'm flanked here by other Mohawk chiefs. In the 1600s and 1700s, the English were always on our doorstep, looking for a strong military ally to oppose their imperial opponent, the French king. Our people sided with the king to be the king's ally, and we have fought in every war since that time, over 300 years. The Crown entered into historic treaties with our people The Crown is not honouring those treaties, and all I heard you say is that you wanted to honour the modern treaties. What about the historic ones? Our land was supposed to be protected from trespass. The Crown failed in its responsibility. All they can ask us for is to offer us money and to extinguish the rights to our land that we never surrendered in the first place. The Crown accepted the claim because it was never surrendered. When we file claims, your staff lose our files. You lost the claim for the middle third of the Tyndall track in 2020. I had to deliver another box to Mark Miller. This is no long, and it was through the help of our people that the English asserted sovereignty, but with the help of the English, the Imperial Crown in historic times. Otherwise, there would be no Canada. And so I want to know what you're prepared to do to honour the historic treaties that go beyond the modern, that date back beyond the modern treaties. I never heard you say anything in your speech about that this morning.
Miigwech to all chiefs. So the session, the Q&A session is now closed, and we'll go for final comments by Minister Anandasangaree. Over to you, Minister, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. There's a lot for me to cover, so I will be very, very brief. Let me just start off with the questions around Trans Mountain. First of all, I will speak to Minister Hajdu. I'm not personally involved with it, but I will be more than glad to have a conversation on this with you as well, Chief Spahan. With respect to historical treaties, and there's a number of questions around historical treaties. No, Canada has not done a good job in honouring historical treaties. I think it's one of the reasons why a lot of disparities continue to exist. And I think we're working through many of the past wrongs, and we are trying to address them. We have some very concrete examples of progress. So agriculture benefits, for example, in Manitoba and Saskatchewan have been fast-tracked, so we are trying to get resolution on that, and we have already resolved many of those claims. The Robinson-Huron Treaty discussions have concluded with an unprecedented $10 billion towards failed annuity increases. And we're continuing to work on many of the outstanding issues. It's not a perfect fix, and it's certainly not the way I think we should have done this from the outset, but here we are. We are trying to correct the mistakes. It will not bring back the losses you have and the failures that have existed, but it does bring us to a better place, and I look forward to working towards that. Chief from Beaver Lake, I'm sorry I didn't get your name. The opioid crisis is a national crisis. It's impacting many communities, but particularly northern and remote communities, and I've heard this over and over and over again, and the impact on families, on communities, and nations is severe. And it is something that I think we're, as all levels of government, are grappling with to see what the best course of action is. And I don't think we have a simple solution. I think we have multiple solutions. Some of them are attempts to look at new ways of doing things, and treatment facilities are a critical part of that. I know there's some discussion around treatment facilities in many communities, and the folks I met this week have reconfirmed that. But it's a crisis that I think many in this room are on the forefront of. I know many chiefs, when I was in New York for the UN PIFI, many chiefs told me about what they lost just that week, and it is just absolutely heartbreaking to see. In terms of Chief Betty, I think she was talking about the loss, and I think the challenges she's facing in her community, and the need for reform on policing and making sure that there's localized policing and supports that are self-determined, and I know Mr. LeBlanc talked about this as well when he was here. And we will work together towards ensuring that there's First Nations policing that is available to all. In terms of ATR reform, I think this is Councillor Shorting was talking about ATR reform, and some others talked about this as well. People spoke about land back, and that is definitely something that I believe in as well. You know, returning land is an essential part of reconciliation, and whether it's through modern treaties or through ATR reform or through any of the other processes we have, the return of land is crucial. And I will work with you on that. I know with the NCTR, it's a little bit more difficult for us because these are agreements that were done many years ago, and unfortunately the nature of the Federation does limit us from just saying we cannot continue within the NCTR. So it is a conversation I've had with many of you in this room, many of you as I visit your communities, but it is something that I think we have some limitations on. In terms of, I think Chief Cody Diabo's comments with respect to membership. Look, I have no business defining who and who is not a member of your community. The Indian Act does not have business defining who and who is not a member of your community. Canada does not have that, should not have that ability, but unfortunately, we're here where that is one of the root issues around the Indian Act and the systemic failures and discrimination that exists within the Indian Act. So we've had a number of temporary band-aid solutions, whether it's the second-generation cutoff or sex discrimination within the Indian Act, where we are constantly doing patchwork to keep up. But ultimately, I think we need to get to a place where membership and citizenship is defined by you in your communities, and I do want to get to that point, and I can make that commitment to work with you to that effect. If I missed anyone, I will, I'm around for the rest of the afternoon as well, and my team is here. Thank you all for your candid comments and conversations, and of course, this is a way for you to keep me and the government accountable, and we will continue to be here and to work. Whether we can advance as fast at the pace you want may be difficult, but we will continue to be there to have these conversations. Thank you. Sorry, in RTA, you're right. In RTA. That's correct. Natural Resource Transfer Act. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you so much, Mr. Minister Anandasangaree. Yep. Your time was very, very appreciated, as we can see by all the chiefs and proxies and the delegation. And National Chief has a gift for you. And yep.
Thank you, and I know that I really appreciate you staying longer. I know I've been muscling you here to stay a bit longer, but it's so important that we hear from our people. We have a small gift for you on behalf of all of us, the Assembly of First Nations, as well for your daughter. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And on that, we will navigate to our next speaker, because we're a bit behind schedule. So on that, I want to first thank a big thank you to our next guest speaker for his understanding. We're a bit late, but I'm sure you understand that. And I will now invite the next speaker, Terry Duguid, Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister and Special Advisor on Water. Welcome on the stage, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. Bonjour tout le monde, c'est un grand plaisir d'être ici avec vous ce matin. Thank you for having me as your
guest today on the traditional territory of the Kahnawake Haga people. And I've had the opportunity in the past to speak to various fora on water that AFN has hosted, but it's a great honor for me today to speak at your annual General Assembly on a topic that I know is of great interest, essential to the life of your communities, essential to life on this planet. And if you'll cast your minds back to 2015, there were at least 105 water advisories in effect for over a year. You know more than anyone how this happened. Decades of successive governments, including governments led by my party, ignored the needs of First Nations and chose not to invest fairly. This peaked under Stephen Harper and Pierre Poilievre, when your calls were ignored and you had to take it to the streets to be heard. In 2015, Prime Minister Trudeau promised to repair that relationship. 9 years later, there is still a lot of work to do, but significant progress has been made. Today, 30 long-term water advisories are still in effect, down from 105. There are plans in place and work being done to eliminate those remaining 30. And I know it is no consolation to those 30 that remain. I had just about 45 minutes ago a meeting with Grand Chief Fiddler and Chief Monius from Niskandaga, and which really brought home to me the reality that many First Nations still face in terms of health impacts and mental health impacts of these boil water advisories. But the progress that has been made, First Nations communities across the country made this happen. First Nations water operators, water walkers, water keepers, and water carriers worked tirelessly to get us there. They did their job and got the work done. They just needed a government to do its job and invest in them, realizing that there's much more work to do. Now, we can never let reckless cuts and indifference of the Harper era bring us back to where we were in 2015. That's why we tabled Bill C-61, the proposed First Nations Clean Water Act. It has the potential of ensuring access to clean drinking water and better water management for generations to come. Pendant trop longtemps, trop de Premières Nations ne pouvaient pas faire à l'eau qui sortait de leur robinet. C'est injuste, surtout dans un pays qui se veut égalitaire. L'eau potable est un besoin de base. For too long, too many First Nations didn't have confidence that the water they got from their taps was safe. This is a fundamental injustice, especially in a country that prides itself in supporting equality. Clean and safe water is a basic need. Bill C-61 would recognize and affirm the inherent right to self-government, including First Nation jurisdiction in relation to water, source water, drinking water, wastewater, and related infrastructure on, in, and under First Nations lands. Aligned with the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, C-61 is the result of historic consultation and knowledge sharing with First Nations partners. Since 2018, we have been engaging with First Nations rights holders through institutions like the Assembly of First Nations on legislative reform. Indigenous modern treaty and self-governing partners have also been engaged on a bilateral basis. We also shared 2 drafts of the bill with First Nations across the country and posted them online for review. And we know some First Nations feel that they were not adequately consulted, and we're taking steps to remedy that. As you know, even though the Conservatives held up the bill for 7 months in the House of Commons, it is now moved to committee, and in the fall we'll be hearing directly from many of you in committee, and we are open we are open to making changes to that bill so it better meets the needs of First Nations communities. But we cannot do this alone. We need your leadership, and we need you to make it clear to Conservatives that they cannot further delay this bill in committee. Parce que vous savez pourquoi il faut avancer, trop de communautés n'ont pas leur mot à dire dans la protection de l'eau, et elles souffrent de leur contamination. Because you know why it is important we move forward. Too many communities don't have a say in the protection of their source water and suffer from its contamination. Take the Mikisew Cree Nation in Alberta. In November, there was a third spill upstream of communities at the Curl Mine. According to Chief Billy Joe Tuccaro, who I spoke to personally at committee, people are scared to drink the water. The provincial Conservatives refuse to acknowledge this failure. In fact, a week after the third spill, Provincial Minister Brian Jean called the company's commitment to environmental protection top-notch. We also know the situation that the people in Grassy Narrows are facing. People's health is on the line. All governments cannot continue to do more of the same. That's why we've created the Canada Water Agency. It is the focal point for fresh water, working in collaboration with all partners, including Indigenous peoples, to keep water safe, clean, and well managed. Bill C-61 will focus on water and related infrastructure on First Nations lands. On its part, the Canada Water Agency is focusing on improving water outcomes more broadly in the country, which includes modernizing the Canada Water Act, Canada's major water protection law. It has been over 50 years since the Canada Water Act came into force, brought in by Pierre Elliott Trudeau in 1971, and during that time, since then, much has changed in our environment, our society, and legislative framework. For example, freshwater challenges have increased due to factors such as population growth, industrial development, and agricultural intensification. Climate change, of course, is with us, amplifying freshwater impacts. The United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, UNDA, also came into force in 2021, requiring the Government of Canada to take all measures necessary to ensure that the laws of Canada are consistent with the Declaration. In 2021, the Prime Minister mandated Minister Stephen Gilber, our Minister of Environment, to, following the establishment of the Canada Water Agency, advance the modernization of the Canada Water Act to reflect Canada's current freshwater reality, including climate change and Indigenous rights. As a first step, the Canada Water Agency has started a and I emphasize this, pre-engagement phase of this review process. During this phase, the agency will seek input from Indigenous partners on how they want to be engaged during the Canada Water Act review. This will culminate in meaningful and well-funded plans for the next engagement phase. The Canada Water Agency will also lead on the delivery of freshwater ecosystem initiatives under the strengthened Freshwater Action Plan by investing $650 million to strengthen the protection and restoration of major watersheds such as the Great Lakes, Lake Winnipeg, Lake of the Woods, the St. Lawrence River, the Fraser River, the Wollastock-St. John River, the Mackenzie River, and Lake Simcoe. For all of those initiatives to work, they need to respect your self-determination, because Ottawa knows best solutions are not only disrespectful, they simply don't work. When he was Minister of Housing, Pierre Poilievre oversaw a paternalistic, one-size-fits-all housing fund of $300 million for First Nations, but he did not consult you, did not let communities take the lead, and the result, he got exactly 99 homes built this way. The same can be said about the Conservative approach to water. They did not follow the lead of communities, so more and more advisories appeared and they were not addressed. This changed when we decided to work with First Nations partners and follow your lead. When communities have what they need to take the lead, we see results. Take, for example, Star Blanket Cree Nation, who just last week celebrated the opening of a new water treatment plant, state-of-the-art. It is providing clean water to all homes and community buildings. This is a crucial step in lifting their long-term water advisory. Greater self-determination also means communities have what they need to address issues as soon as they arise. Mushua Innu First Nation, Mishki Gogamang First Nation, and others all were able to recently address issues quickly and lift their short-term water advisories before they became long-term. Self-determination also means that communities have the resources to hire and train local technicians to manage and maintain water systems. That includes water operators like Warren Brown from Lytton, BC First Nation, who won the National First Nations Water Leadership Award in 2023. He operates 13 drinking water systems and has led work to lift 6 long-term drinking water advisories. When First Nations communities are responsible for their own water, and when they have the resources they need to build infrastructure and train the staff, the gaps close. The work being done for Bill C-61 and through the Canada Water Agency is also aligned with efforts to combat environmental inequities. This includes efforts to address environmental racism. I know a topic that comes up commonly in the House of Commons, and we now have Bill C-226, an act respecting the development of a national strategy to assess, prevent, and address environmental racism and advance environmental justice. As you know, environmental racism has a long history in Canada. For decades, certain communities have been disproportionately affected by environmental hazards such as pollution, toxic waste, landfills, and dumps. The experience of Indigenous peoples in this space is particularly pronounced, given the history of colonialism and relationship with the Crown. This new law acknowledges the ongoing inequities across the country and that the communities bearing these burdens are often members of an Indigenous, racialized, or an otherwise marginalized group. It also begins to chart a path forward towards environmental justice. So just concluding, through Bills C-61 and C-226 and the work of the Canada Water Agency, we are doing our best to follow the lead of Indigenous partners. These bills are meant to advance equality and justice across Canada with First Nations communities, and fundamentally, they're about fairness. We know there is still a lot of work to do. Centuries of colonialism will not be fixed overnight. But again, following your lead, we can protect the precious fresh water of this land for this and future generations to come. I know I'm looking forward to sitting in on the plenary session on C-61 and listening to how you think the bill can be improved and how we can continue our journey of partnership together. So thank you very much, and thank you, National Chief, for the invitation, and I hope you have a great assembly. Thanks so much.